Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of 7 Days to Sunday. Of course, as we get a load of the Buffalo Bills and try to make sense of what happened on Sunday. I don't know if we can, but Jerry and I will try as I welcome in, of course, the Tulsa Hall of Famer and, of course, the standout with the Buffalo Bills, Mr. Jerry Ostroski. What's going on tonight, my friend?
Not much, Zig. Not much. Just ready to play a game Sunday and try to figure out a way to get last Sunday out of our memory. Obviously, Bills played horribly. You know the old saying, they didn't get off the bus. I'm not sure they got on the plane to Miami, but they lose 30-13. Miami snapped a seven-game losing streak to the Bills in a game that Buffalo had basically no offense, no answer for A-Chain in the Miami running game, and with explosive plays and turnovers, Miami was able to get a big victory and put the Bills in an even bigger hole in the AFC East.
Yeah, I had a chance to chat with Jordan Brooks, who was the leading tackler after the game for my show on Sirius XM NFL Radio, and basically he was saying that, they got tired of the losing, and this was shortly after here, Jerry, the fact that they got rid of the GM Chris Greer. Of course, they traded Jalen Phillips, who was a monster figure Monday night in the Eagles' win over the Green Bay Packers. So he says, we got tired of being dominated. We got tired of the losing, especially to Buffalo. And quite frankly, he thought the defense had been playing better for about the last 4 or 5 weeks. And again, you can't have a goal line interception by Josh. You can't have that fumble by Josh on the one quarterback run there where he had the first down, but he tried to get more yardage. They made A-Chan look like Mercury Morris, for goodness sakes. And if you're old enough to know who Mercury Morris is, Bills fans of a different era could tell you who Mercury Morris was. So in the final analysis, and Tua was even half decent himself, Miami earned that one. Buffalo's heads, Jerry, I don't know where they were at, my friend.
Looking at that situation, looking at the Bills and just their energy level, lack thereof, lack of urgency, and all those things. I mean, you kind of look back sometimes. I don't want to call this a trap game. This should never be a trap game. I don't care what Miami's record is, what place in the schedule it is. You're playing the Dolphins, and maybe to the players, the Dolphins rivalry doesn't mean what it did to myself and the guys that I played with back in the 90s and the late 80s. But I'll tell you what, to the fan base, it is everything. Sure. And the fact they came out with that effort is disappointing. But you look at this team, Zig, and I don't know, you start thinking about human nature and just the way things are, and you have a big victory against Kansas City. The last 2 weeks, you kind of righted the ship. Josh was much better against Carolina. Not quite there. He was real good against Kansas City. Had a few plays, but definitely trending upward. You beat Kansas City and that kind of, the team that's become your rival in the AFC. And then you go ahead and you work towards Tuesday, which is the trade deadline. Right. And, I think everybody in that locker room was expecting something to be done. They were expecting help to show up. And then at 4 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesday, nothing is done. And there's that kind of energy letdown. Pile on top of that the injuries and everything else. I can see maybe some human nature that crept in. But as far as calling this a trap game and the fact that they came out as flat as they did, it's unacceptable. And it should never happen, especially with professional athletes. So I'm not discounting some of the human nature aspects of this, but this was something that I don't think anybody expected. And, Miami took advantage of it with a great start.
Do you think that maybe it was partly that we've won, 6, 7 in a row against them? We've had this great success. Let's just roll the ball out there and we're going to win anyway. Is that entitlement or complacency? Does that set in during a rivalry?
I think maybe there was a little bit of complacency as far as Miami being 2-7. But anytime you travel to Miami at any point in time, it's a miserable place to play at any point in the season. If you play early, it's crazy hot. If you play when they did last week, maybe it's not as hot, but it's still humid and it's much hotter than where Buffalo's coming from. You can never take this game lightly, but, I think that, you said that Brooks said that, they were tired of losing. I think that, when you get rid of a general manager, the coach is on the hot seat. players are being traded, not just role players. These star players are getting traded.
Sure.
Then the the rumor leaks out supposedly, and I would imagine that information was leaked out by Brandon Beane himself. But you find out that that team was really close to not having Jalen Waddle. That the Bills tried to trade for Jalen Waddle as well as Quinnen Williams. Maybe they did have enough. I think it's a point in time where when you start looking around and big pieces of the pie start disappearing, that raises your dauber up a little bit. That kind of gets your attention. And I think that effort that Miami had was in line with that, with what they've seen, and realized that, hey, we don't start putting efforts together, we're all going to be out of here. And they decided to put a game together.
7 Days to Sunday continues, sponsored by FanDuel. Jerry Ostroski, Zig Fracassi. Yeah, it's almost like the after the fact. Oh, the Bills tried to get Jalen Waddle. Well, that's all well and good, but you had to wonder, you had to think Miami was asking at the bare minimum a first-round pick and maybe other considerations if indeed this is true.
Well, I think the rumor was that everything was settled upon except when the first-round pick was going to happen, what year. The Bills wanted to give a 27. The Dolphins wanted a 26. I have to say, if we had a chance to get Jalen Waddle and the sticking point was what year the first-round pick was in, I've got an extreme issue with that. I think any chance, a first-round pick is a first-round pick. Yep. And you got to look at it this way. And this is the way I look at it. You get Jalen Waddle in here for a 26 first-round pick and a 26 third-round pick. Okay, you've got 2 picks that are high that are gone, but Jalen Waddle then becomes your first-round choice.
Exactly.
And he fills an immediate need of what you need. The fact you wanted to push it to 27, I get where you were coming from, but it just – it was kind of – that whole scenario to me was self-serving and wasn't needed. But I also understand sometimes people feel the need to be out in front of the narrative and control the narrative as opposed to letting it get out on its own. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you don't get it – you have a chance to get a Waddle and you don't because you don't want to do a 26 and 27, that's kind of ridiculous. But also what else I think is ridiculous, Zig, have you ever seen at any point in time in the National Football League that a team that is in your division and you are the lead dog is willing to give you one of the star players of the league to help your cause? I just don't see that either. I don't see how that works. I mean, if I was going to try and trade for a receiver, I'd have gone elsewhere because I would imagine that an AFC East team wasn't going to trade with us. So, you can look at that as well.
Well, I think we even heard about, what was it? I heard it on one of the on the internet things today, and a good friend of mine, Brian Broadus, does a lot of work down in Dallas on radio, and they were talking about a potential poison pill, apparently, that was put in the deal with the Cowboys and the Packers involving Parsons, which obviously Clark and the 2 first rounders went to Dallas because they didn't want Green Bay then turning Parsons around to Philadelphia for greater consideration, right? So they didn't want that, and that's actually a smart move for a change by Jerry Jones.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
so you wouldn't have wanted that here. Yeah.
No, you wouldn't want that here. I mean, I think it was very smart by Jerry Jones because people know that Philadelphia, wanted Micah Parsons, and Micah would have gone to Philly in a heartproot because he's from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Actually,
that's his home team. I mean, that's who he cheered for. He's an hour and something away from Philly. So, props to them. But yeah, I mean, you don't get anything traded on. You come out and you do this, but just a really disappointing outcome. And I know this is Wednesday, the next week, and it's been talked about ad nauseum, but obviously a guy that I have a lot of respect for in the league and think is a tremendous player, Devon Achane. Obviously, he was a star for the Miami Dolphins, 22 carries, 174 yards, had 2 fourth quarter touchdowns, one of 59, one of 35, that basically shut the door. You talk about Tua was kind of the point guard of the offense for Miami, 15 of 21, 173 yards, 2 TDs. He did have 2 interceptions, but Miami goes in with a 16-0 halftime lead. And I have to say this, Zig, I commend the defense for them only being down 16-0. They have deficiencies everywhere due to injury. Yep. You think about it, if they could field the team that they want to, that defense would be pretty dang good. They're out there piecemeal together. Joey Bosa's playing with a club on his hand. Yep. One time, Achane ran through a tackle because he just couldn't grab him. and for
They
that
lost
defense,
another defender, right,
yeah,
Jerry?
yeah,
Was it
yeah.
Jackson, I think it was?
No, they lost. Yeah, it was Jackson. It was Landon Jackson.
Landon
So
Jackson, right, yeah.
has a PCL, MCL injury. So Landon
And
Jackson went
Kincaid's
out.
hurt too now.
Right,
Yeah.
Kincaid's now hurt. You got
Yeah.
Daquan Jones, who comes back from 2-3 weeks on the injured list with the calf. He's got to play 20-some snaps at defensive end because Jackson went out with injury. So the guy you're hoping to get back to solidify somewhat that interior defensive line, he now has to play defensive end, and you're back to square one with a rookie, a practice squad elevation, and a 33-year-old guy that was on the practice squad to start the year playing inside. It just doesn't, bode well for stopping any sort of run game. And, I talked about it last week, Zig, when I said that, I made the tongue-in-cheek joke about sending Andy Reid a spiral cut ham for not running the football.
That's right.
Now you know what I was talking about.
Yes, I do. Yep.
And, they ran it well. And then, of course, that Miami defense did a hell of a job with their game plan to stop James Cook. And you have a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. I know you want to get into the roster construction, but what if we construct some wings and maybe some beef on Wex and all that while we do that? What do you think?
Sure. Construct a little snack. And if you're hungry and if you're in the city of Buffalo or one of the cities like Frisco, Texas, or Tucson, Arizona that has an Anchor bar, stop on by and get the original Buffalo wing, jumbo wings, fresh, never frozen. If you don't want wings, they've got wings with, of course, multiple sauces. If you don't want wings, you want something else, get other Buffalo classics like a beef on weck, get some pizza. They've got wraps, salads, whatever you need. Anybody you're bringing in there, there's always somebody that's finicky or somebody's watching what they eat or whatever. They have options for you. And the Anchor Bar, the original home of the Buffalo wing, the wing invented in 1964. Teresa and Frank Bellissimo started the Anchor Bar and invented the Buffalo wing. Now you not only have options to order online, you can also go to one of the various locations across the country, and we're proud to say that the Anchor Bar is a sponsor of the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network.
Yep, and delicious for many, many years as we continue 7 days to Sunday, sponsored by FanDuel, Jerry Ostroski, Zig Fracassi. So basically now the trade deadline's come and gone, unless, I guess, Jerry, if you want to try to pillar somebody, some guy off a practice squad or whatever, or waivers, aren't you pretty much fixed in with the roster the Bills currently have right now?
Yeah, exactly. And the name slips my mind, but the Bills just did sign a receiver.
Hardman.
Yeah, Hardman, who was on the Kansas City Chiefs that caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl and is known for his punt returns. And as you've seen of late, Codrington's been on the inactive list. Shakir's been handling punt return duties. I would not doubt if Hardman gets called up at some point to handle those punt return situations and maybe become another option at receiver. But, the biggest issue right now for the Bills is at tight end with Dalton Kincaid week to week. I would expect him – usually in-game hamstrings like this aren't good. And we saw that the hamstring went sometime in the second quarter. I would expect him to be out 2 to 4 weeks. You hope to get Taron Johnson back. He's been beat up and out. You lost Christian Benford last week as a surprise that came up on the injury report. You hope to get him back. This is a really big week, Zig, for our defensive secondary. Mika Buka and a lot of these BUCS receivers are really good, and they've got some injury issues as well. They've got a few guys as well that are out as far as like Chris Godwin, Bucky Irving,
Evans.
Mike Evans, Bucky Irving, who
I like.
You ought to be grateful that he's probably not expected to play because Bucky is a really good running back. And then, of course, they've been shuffling their offensive line all season. Luke Goedke, the right tackle, he's listed as back this week, but they'll be shuffling and have another starting five up front. And that's kind of later on we talk about keys to the game. That's something we can look into. But, yeah, I mean, obviously the Bills have to figure some things out. You hope that Epinesa can play this week. He was out with the concussion. Because if Epinesa comes back, then you can take Daquan, move him inside. Now, granted, if Epinesa can't play, Zig, you'll take a defensive end off of the practice squad. I'm sure there's others besides Landon Jackson. Can't remember exactly who. But defensively right now, it's piecemeal. It really is. And this is going to be another week where Maxwell Hairston's going to have to step up and probably run with Emeka Egbuka and cover him all over the field as we try to figure out how we're going to fit everybody else in there on defense. But I know that Waddle had a few plays on Hairston, but I didn't mind it. I mean, you're going to get beat in this league. It's part of it. I was really happy to see his fight and the fact that he got back in there, got the interception after giving up that touchdown, and competed the whole game. So that was a good sign as well.
I want to circle this back to Hardman for a second because I was at that Super Bowl, and that was the game-winning catch there from Mahomes, the 49ers Super Bowl there in Las Vegas. And they had brought him back before. So I would ask you, obviously he's good, a decent enough slot guy, and also with the punt returns. Does the fact that he's got Super Bowl experience and a ring, and by the way, a member of the team that has dominated you in the postseason, does that rub off into the locker room at all, having a guy like that?
I don't necessarily know if it rubs off in the locker room. He's still kind of a young guy, but it does validate him. Okay. He's had success at the highest levels. Right. So, yeah, I think he has validation, and I don't think this is just to grab somebody out of thin air and bring him in to try to help. Obviously he's got some ability. He's got abilities and skill sets that'll help this football team. Lord knows they need help outside at receiver, but also a punt returner. So, yeah, like I said, I don't know if it's like he comes in and, he's over there rubbing shoulders with Josh Allen, and Josh is like absorbing all this information from him about the Super Bowl and everything. But I will say this, he comes in validated as somebody that's been there and has been successful in the biggest game in our league. And, like I said, while that signing doesn't excite many, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's pretty good.
No, he's, like I say, veteran, proven commodity, Super Bowl champion. So, and to me, for a team that's trying to get back to one and obviously win one for the first time, hey, you got to do what you can at this point in time.
You know what, Zig? The way I look at it, though, and it just goes to show you this last, I guess you would say, 2, 4, 5-game stretch for the Bills in the schedule. I mean, really, all the Bills should be concerned about is themselves. I mean, when they decide to play, they're pretty darn good. When they don't decide to play, or they, for whatever reason, have limitations, they're not very good. And we've seen all ends of the spectrum over this last 5 weeks. And hopefully, and I would expect them. I'm picking the Bills this week. I'm going to go ahead and say it early right now. FanDuel line of the game. Bills are laying 5.5 according to FanDuel. But I do like Buffalo in this game. I just think I don't know why, but they seem to be much better with a chip on their shoulder with people doubting them than they are as front runners. And they're definitely in that situation right now. I did a show today with a bunch of other NFL guys and talked about the Bills, and nobody's very high on Buffalo. A lot of just, a lot of negative connotations as far as, surrounding the Bills and directed towards the Bills. And I just kind of sat and took it in. But, I think that they do compete in situations like this much better than they do as kind of the lead dogs.
Of course, the Bills take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 1:00 Eastern at Highmark Stadium. I thought, Jerry, that was going to be a game that might get flexed to like 4:25.
Right.
Or, well, they weren't going to move Mondays because even though both the Cowboys and the Raiders are mediocre, they're both ratings machines. So you're never going to move that off Monday Night Football. I thought maybe it would get flexed to the 4:25 window where the Ravens and the Browns was, but they decided not to do that. You and I were talking off air here. New England beat Tampa down in Tampa last week. And it was interesting to hear Baker Mayfield, who, let's face it, he's always got something to prove. He's been doubted, and he's resurrected his career, I think, wonderfully. Talked about the fact that, maybe our team at times lacks a little bit of killer instinct. And when and he even included himself in that. So they got to play from ahead, I think, to have that type of edge that Baker would want. So it would be incumbent on the Bills, to me at least, to score first and not have Tampa have that momentum early.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's probably one of the areas of deficiency right now in this Bills team that I'd really like to see change. And that's, I've always felt the best teams are player-led, not coach-led. And when you've got a guy like Baker Mayfield that's not afraid to go out and speak his mind, say what he says, Baker has played in this league at a level that he's warranted those comments.
Right.
Okay. It's the same thing with Josh Allen. Josh has played well in this league, has been MVP. He can say those things as well if he wants to, not his personality. And I think it's the one thing the Bills are missing. It's one thing we weren't missing back in the 90s when I played. There was a group of guys, most of them in the Hall of Fame right now, that had no problems, calling people out or getting things off their chest. It'd be nice to see some of these guys, maybe a Josh Allen. I know James Cook is real quiet, but it'd be good to see like a James Cook or a Deion Dawkins defensively, maybe Christian Benford, maybe Joey Bosa, maybe, Bosa feels he can't do anything like that because he hasn't been here long enough. But it'd be nice to have somebody come out, be real. I get it. You got to play better. I know you got to play better. We all know you got to play better. We just watched the game. Right. Okay, we saw it. We get those things. But it'd be nice to see somebody, bring some accountability and maybe call some people out.
Not to interrupt you, but do you think maybe part of that now is because they have this, we all love each other, we all have great character, that maybe you're kind of afraid to step on somebody's toes?
I think it's totally it. But, in this world, in this day and age, there's a difference between love and like. Okay. Right. And I always go back to like a situation like parenting with your kids.
Sure.
I love my kids, right? I love all my kids, every one of them, all four of them. And you know what? They do a lot of things that I don't like, that I get on them about, but that does not change the fact that I love them immensely. And I think we get caught up in this world of social media, and we're all looking for likes, right, Zig? We all want likes. Hit the heart button, hit the thumbs up. And we're so built up, likes and all that come and go. But when you love somebody, and I know this Bills team has a lot of love for one another, that puts you in a position and gives you the ability to be tough on your teammates sometimes. And I do wish I'd seen some of that.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I think it's because of a guy like Baker who isn't afraid to call his guys out. I think it's absolutely fabulous to watch. So as we continue here, 7 days to Sunday, sponsored by FanDuel, Jerry Ostroski, Zig Fracassi. I always wait for this because I know you've thought this out extremely well. 3 keys to this game on Sunday, starting with number 1.
Well, I mean, when you look at this game, the first thing you're going to have to look at is the weather. And we're getting ready to have some Buffalo-like weather at game time. We're going to get cooler temperatures, a lot of rain, wind, those types of things. You're going to have bad weather. So when you look at this, I would say probably my key to the game every week is going to be this until things change at receiver. The Bills have to get an advantage in the ground game. They've got to figure out a way to run the ball. I thought Miami did a great job last week with their linebackers and their secondary type players of not over pursuing, allowing those defensive linemen to tie up linemen. And then when guys moved up to double team, they almost did it too quickly as the Bills tried to go lateral. Those linebackers, instead of running lateral, stayed put and kind of hovered. When they read the cutback of James Cook, they were downhill, and it usually was 1 or 2 guys making the tackle. And they're going to have to clean that up, whether they go to their gap schemes or their power and their counter or some of that dart stuff they do with one tackle pulling. They've got to make sure they get James Cook going, because this is the other part that you look at. And I love James Cook. I think he's one of the best backs in the league. But I don't want my offense to be known as going through James Cook. I want my offense to be known for going through Josh Allen. But that being said, and limitations at receiver, and now with Kincaid out at tight end, this offense, the ball's going to have to go through James Cook for a while until people get healthy and things get right. And my key to the game is the Bills have to figure out a way to get a ground advantage against.
Well, do you line them up out wide then?
We saw some throws to James Cook this game. I think that they can do more with James. I think they're rather simplistic with him. He kind of runs the same rail route all the time. Mm-hmm. Joe Brady runs a lot of rail route concepts, double crossers in the middle, and then they'll run Cook on on what you would call like a tight end rail or a tailback rail or a tailback wheel route that he's hit. But I think there's other ways to get him involved more than he is. But yeah, I'd like to see him much more involved in the passing game.
I know we got other keys to the game, but now it made me think when you just mentioned Joe Brady, because, of course, we saw the news this week. Western New York native and former Bills offensive coordinator Brian Daboll relieved of his duties as Giants head coach. And I know there's been a clamoring, Jerry, about possibly wanting him to return to Western New York, although the last time I remembered, he and Sean McDermott didn't exactly chant kumbaya together.
Right.
So.
And I think, time heals all wounds, Zig. I would imagine that whatever happened when they were together the first time, both of them probably figured out the things that they did wrong and know the things they did right. And if it will come to that situation where, Brady takes another job or moves on, if they wanted to bring Daboll back, I think that invitation would be extended. The one thing I like about him is he's got some fire to him. This team needs a little bit of attitude,
Actually.
and he's got experience with Josh Allen. I say this a lot, and it does bother me a bit, Zig, that we seem to always go back to the past to fix problems of the future. I'd like to, maybe look at somebody we haven't had in here before. But if Daboll's the one that comes in because of his familiarity with Josh Allen, I don't have a problem with that. But I don't think we're at that point yet.
No, I don't either. Key number two?
Key number two is the Bucs have been really good on the road this
Yes.
season. When you look at Tampa Bay, they've been strong away from home. 4 of their 5 wins are road. 4 of their 4 wins in 5 games on the road for the Tampa Bay Bucs. And so the Bills are going to have to do something to counteract that. And that's, control the clock with that ground game, quick strikes. They've got to figure out a way to get to Baker. One thing about Baker is he's mobile, but Baker will take some big shots. He's a little bit different than Josh. Josh, being the bigger quarterback, can absorb a little more, but he does have a knack for not taking the big shots. Baker has a tendency to get lit up. So the Bills have to start quickly. They've got to establish themselves fast because this Bucs team is very comfortable playing in front of a hostile crowd. They've shown it with their record, and the Bills have to counteract that.
Well, and to further your point, wins at Houston against a very good Texans defense, and one of the 2 teams that beat Seattle this year, that was up in where the 12s usually reign supreme. So those are the couple quality road wins for them.
Right, exactly. And, like we talked about this weekend, they lost to New England at home. They've had some issues winning at home in Tampa, but a lot of times there's teams that are just like that. They're much more comfortable being away from home. They like being on the road. They like that feeling of it's us against everyone else. And different things motivate different teams. And obviously, Tampa Bay is one that's much more comfortable playing away from home. And Bills have to figure out a way to counteract that. And the way you counteract that is you get going early. You don't go into the locker room down or, a super close game. Now, I wouldn't be in shock if it was a close game because the Bucs are a good football team. But the Bills need to find a way to squash that and get things going early.
And key number 3 is?
Key number 3 is something we talked about a little earlier, and that's this Buffalo Bills defense. And you don't know what their health is going to be as far as Epinesa, as far as some of these other defensive linemen. Obviously, they lost Jackson. Milano and Bernard are struggling to find fits in the run game and just kind of find their place in general. I think that the Bills on defense have a chance to take advantage of the musical chairs that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been playing in on the offensive line. And how do you do that? You bring complicated simulated pressures. Things where you show 6 coming, you bring 4, but you don't know which 4 are coming. Maybe bring a 5th. One thing Buffalo does really well is blitz cornerbacks off the edge. They've got to bring sim pressures and blitzes to try to confuse this makeshift or patchwork Tampa Bay O-line. I know they got Goedke back this week. That'll help, but still, it's not a complete unit. He's been out. He's going to have to try to get his timing back, try to get that comfortability working next to the guy that he hasn't been next to in a while. So, yeah, I think Buffalo has an advantage here where they can get some sim pressure looks and get some big plays and big shots on Baker against an offensive line that's been banged up and hasn't played together or gelled maybe the way you would think they would at this point in the season.
And if I'm not mistaken, Bills have a short week because they got to go down to Houston Thursday night.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, man. That's going
to be tough.
Yeah, this is another vital aspect of the Bills playing well this week against the Bucs, and that's going to Houston. this is a really good defense.
Yes, they
A
are.
really good defense. And they're going to have to find ways to manufacture points and yards down there just because they can do a lot of things in their secondary. Their pass rush is outstanding. Guys like Will Anderson. They're a formidable opponent. And to have them on a short week in a game, too, that I expect to be physical. The Bucs play physical football. Todd Bowles runs a great defense. They got big dudes like Vita Vea. They got other guys that can get after it. I would expect this game to be physical. You're banged up to begin with. Then you got a short week. I didn't envision the issues that the Bills had, coming like they did last week, and then against Atlanta, and then also against New England. I thought New England would be tough, but I thought those were 3 games the Bills would win. And this Houston game coming up was one I had circled as, hey, this is going to be difficult. Now, you've given some back. It makes this one even that much more important.
Well, let's not forget, prior to the game the Texans have, they were down 19 into the fourth quarter against Jacksonville Sunday, 26 points in the fourth with Davis Mills as your backup, leading them to the victory. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some teams right now in the league that just have issues closing out games, and one of them is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've been struggling at it, but Mills has been good. I mean, when you have a defense like Houston has, Zig, you don't have to have Superman playing quarterback.
That's right.
You just got to have a guy there that can manage the game, not turn the football over, and make the plays that are in front of him. And that's what you're seeing with this kid. I think he was drafted in 2021 out of Stanford, has been a backup. We'll see.
Started some games.
Yeah, we'll see if Stroud, is off the concussion and healthy enough to play. Part of me almost hopes he is, to be honest with you. I think that, a guy like Mills, and that's just kind of the way you look at quarterbacks now in this league. Do you build your entire team around the quarterback, or do you take a guy like a Mills or a Darnold or somebody like of that nature, or Daniel Jones in Indianapolis, and then insulate him with talent around them? There's multiple ways now to build these teams, and the way Houston plays and the way that defense plays, I think you go ahead and if you stay with a great decision maker like Mills, you can insulate him with great talent elsewhere and win a lot of football games.
7 days to Sunday. Jerry Ostroski, Zig Fracassi, sponsored by FanDuel. Quick loop around the AFC East. We've been talking obviously a lot about the Bucs because their last game was against New England. Yet another big day for the rookie back Trevion Henderson. The Patriots are now a game and a half up on the Bills in the AFC East. They have the Thursday night game this week against the Jets, so they'll have a mini bye. The Dolphins, we all know what havoc they cause, so maybe this is a turnaround for them. And then how about the Jets? Here's a team they trade arguably their 2 best defenders, Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, load up on those first-round picks. And I think then, Jerry, for the first time in their history, a kickoff return and a punt return for them in the same game as they knocked off the Browns.
Exactly. You're in the same situation, Zig. You're in a situation where, do you have these distractions in the locker room by these star players when you're trying to flush out all the bad that's been going on in that franchise? And by that, I mean Aaron Glenn establishing culture.
Right.
These two pieces, it's hard to build when, star players maybe aren't all on board. I'm not saying they weren't. I'm just speculating.
Right.
You move them, you remove maybe a negative message or a negative connotation, but then also, again, like we talked about with Miami and moving Phillips, all of a sudden eyes get real big, and you're like, if they can move those 2 guys, any of us can go.
Yep.
So things change and attitudes change, and obviously those moves, brought some urgency to that group, and they're able to get it done this past week.
Exactly. So, in summation, hopefully we get the Bills like a 24-21 victory, huh?
Yeah, I think that when I look at this game, I'm leaning Bills. I'm leaning for them to barely cover the spread. I like the Bills 26-23.
Okay.
I think that they've got to play a much cleaner game. They can't have the turnovers. I'd expect them to kind of fix that. But without Dalton Kincaid, I don't know if they can get over 30. But I do think they can limit the Bucs, and a lot of that's going to be with, some of that blitzing and some of that sim pressure stuff. And I do like the Bills just with a 26-23 win over the Bucs.
Sounds good, my friend. Until next week, Rhett.
Always, man. Always. We appreciate you, Zig. Thank you so much. As always, folks, hit the like button, subscribe button, review the show, tell a friend. We appreciate you here at the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by Believe, powered by FanDuel. Again, this game against the Bucs, Bills laying 5.5, the FanDuel line of the game. And thanks as always. We appreciate you, and we don't take you for granted. And we'll see you here next week. So as always, folks, much love. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Still the same day.